This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत, झूमेगा भारत. बजेगा भारत, झूमेगा भारत.
This is Bharat FM.
Welcome to Bharat FM's weekly show, Roobaroo. My name is Mayank Chhaya. I'm standing in for our regular guest, Ashish Shah, who has taken a break. First of all, excuse me for my scruffy look, but I'm in the process of shifting out of Chicago to Cincinnati, and my house is all packed up. I've just kept one desk in honor of our remarkable guest today, Mr. Harold D'Souza. Mr. D'Souza, in a short way, he describes himself as a survivor advocate and someone who deals with an extremely sensitive issue of labor trafficking across the world. But he's obviously much more than that. One of the features that struck me about him is something that I'm sure many of you know already. He's someone who has served two diametrically opposite presidents. He began serving under President Obama on the Advisory Council on Human Trafficking in 2015. And remarkably, as I said, he continues to do the same assignment under President Trump. There is a great deal to talk to Mr. D'Souza about, so let me first welcome to the show, Mr. D'Souza.
Thank you very much, Mayank Chhaya. And I just want to tell all my Mara, Badda, Mitrone and friends back in India and in the United States of America and all across the world that happy Independence Day, Vande Mataram, Mera Bharat Maan. Thank you.
Wonderful. It's a great day to communicate with you on a subject which directly talks about individual independence. So let me begin with a broad question. What does independence mean to you personally?
I think independence is very huge. We just take it for granted. Like the air we breathe, we just take it, but same way, like independence has so much meaning, which I understood and respected a lot since childhood, because I've seen how our armies and our frontline people have fought, and it gives you so much privilege, pleasure, and it gives you an opportunity to perform whatever you want to do. So that is, and we have to take the full advantage of this freedom and ensure that our next coming generations, lifelong, live a happy life.
What does India's independence mean to you?
Oh, it means a lot. I still remember as a child, like August 15th, they used to have flag hosting, there was celebration, and those memories are still very fresh in my mind. And the best part is when I came to the United States of America, and then when I got stuck, I understood the real meaning of freedom. So, we many times don't understand, but when you go through that type of a situation, I always used to think now that, how our Jawans are on the borderline at, I know I always watch the news in the snow, how they sacrifice their families back and, and they don't get to talk or see maybe once a year. So it's not easy. And I realized that more while coming to the United States of America is that there are so many individuals here, Mayank Bhai, that they're here alone, but their families back in India or maybe in Nepal or different countries, and they're not seen them for more than 10 years.
Right.
So it's a huge, I get shivers.
You vaguely referred to your personal issues, so let me focus immediately on that. I'm sure a lot of your people who know you would have known about your story, but I think going through your background, I found it quite riveting what you've experienced in your life. Tell me a bit about your experience first as a victim and then as a survivor of labor trafficking and debt bondage. It's something that not a lot of people understand. I'm sure they understand labor trafficking. They may not understand what debt bondage really means, what it means to live like that. Describe those two first, and then we'll zero in further.
Yeah, that's a good question. And, I'm also from Gujarat, and in Gujarat, Kawach Pati Parmeshwar.
Right.
So what I'm trying to tell is that mine is an arranged marriage.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to share how this mind works of a victim, or how an educated person like me can become a victim of human trafficking. So mine was, I got married on a faith, on a trust, on a promise, and on a commitment.
Mhm.
So, that's our culture. In India, we always respect elders. So I was invited to the United States of America in the year 2003 on a $75,000 salary. And I came on four things. I came on a trust, I came on a faith, I came on a promise, and I came to live my American dream. But little did I know, because in India, they say going to America is like going to Swarg, heaven.
Right.
When you land here, then at times the Swarg can become Narg also.
Yeah.
And that heaven can become hell also. So in my case, it was a different story. But the day I landed, my perpetrator told me, Harold, do you have any cash? And I was carrying $1,000 cash. And he tells me, Harold, this is America. You cannot keep any cash with you. Come on. And I was like, wow. So I gave my cash, my documents to him the very first day, with a blink of an eye, not even thinking, just on trust. So this is how then we were made to work in a restaurant. I came on a $75,000 salary, business development manager, in black and white, and that's how I got my H-1B visa. I came legally. But anyway, to cut the long story short, we are working 14 hours to 16 hours a day. And I'll tell you how a victim becomes a debt bondage. He manipulated. It's a long story, which I'll cut it short, but I'll come straight to the point, is that my perpetrator took a loan in my name from a bank, which I had never applied. But anyway, within 6 minutes, I'm with the bank manager. They sign some documents, and there I get a check of 5 figures in my name. So he takes me to his house. And by the way, all these traffickers or perpetrators are multi-millionaires. They're rich people, because the risk factor in human labor trafficking is very thin, and the profit margins are very thick. That's one. Number two, out of 10, 9 do not get prosecuted. And Ohio was one of the 6 states where there was no law on human trafficking in 2003. And that is when I started fighting. But anyway, going back to the story, he takes that, we get the check, he takes me to his $1 million house, he pours a drink in a short glass, scotch, or maybe I don't know what he put it, but he put that and says, Harold, cheers. You're a rich man. And I just gulp it down my throat. And before I could even, the liquor could reach my stomach, he gives me a note. And he says, Harold, you owe me this money.
That's
and I was like,
I'm telling you, that's rather strange. What prompted that?
For this bank loan or for the?
No, how does he have the gumption to tell you that you owe him money?
That's how it works here. That's what people do. So I'll tell you one thing. So he said, I got it from from India. So all the fees and other lawyer fees and it was not Mayank Bhai, it was not, and friends, it was not like $10,000, it was not $20,000, it was not $40,000, it was much more. And I was thinking like, what the hell, like how I'm going to pay this money back? So in 1 second before the liquor could reach my stomach, I lost 4 things. I lost my voice, I lost my courage, I lost my hope, and I lost my freedom. And can you believe that even before I was so quiet. I was just like, I think I might have just stopped breathing, and I don't know what happened. And then he pats me behind. He said, hey, come on, don't worry. You owe me much more.
Really?
Yeah, and I said, oh my God, and can you believe it, Mayank Bhai and friends, at that particular time, I had no clue it was a debt bondage. I had no clue.
So, sorry to interrupt. Take me back. The person who is doing this to you, is he your sponsor or is he someone you happen to meet?
No, it's a person who sponsored me. That's what, no, you come on a sponsor, your employer.
Right. No, I understand. But I'm saying he was the one who organized your H-1 visa?
Yes.
Okay. And then on the strength of that, he wants to exploit your credentials as, say, Social Security and other things to get a bank loan.
Yeah, he takes a bank loan intentionally, which I had no clue. Because and I was talking to all the FBI agent and all law enforcement agencies for almost 10 years. I said, which bank in the world will give you a loan without applying? Right. And one day I was doing a presentation in 2010 at Sisters of Notre Dame, and I was saying the same thing, like, how did he apply for a bank loan? How did he get a loan in my name? And just like a bulb, it clicked that he had all my documentations. I didn't know that.
Exactly.
All my SSN, everything.
Right. I think that's the point I was making, that he had to have your social security number. But I'm baffled by the fact that when you come in new to this country on H-1B visa, you don't have enough credit history for a bank to give you a loan of the figure that you are indicating. Let's go back a bit to your feeling at that point. You gulped down a glass of whiskey or whatever that you were drinking. And obviously, nasha to tabhi utar gaya hoga aapka, usi waqt.
Chadai nahi.
No, so what do you tell him when he says you owe me money? What was your first response?
I didn't respond. Can you believe I didn't say one single word? I was not, I just didn't speak.
Okay.
It's like this, like, I don't know how to explain that when something traumatizing happens in your life, you become numb. I don't know what happened to me. I was not talking. Can you believe me? I was not here almost talking for 10 years.
Oh, it's amazing. So what next? What happens once you leave his house? What are your thoughts? What were you planning at that stage?
Nothing. Can you imagine? The check was deposited in the bank and next day he withdrew all the money.
Okay.
See how they plan it. And the loan is in my name. So every month I have to make a payment.
Right.
And but this was all like he manipulated, tricked and trapped us.
Okay.
He made so much. There's a movie going to come out, a Bollywood film, biopic.
Okay.
Because this I cannot disclose in like 60 minutes or maybe like in one day. Because this is just the tip of the iceberg, Mayank bhai.
Mhm.
There are so much thing that has transpired, which I think can be maybe exhibited in the 3 hours of the film. But then there's a reason I stood up to talk. There are so many people getting exploited here. I've seen 2 people die.
I see.
Yeah, it is horrific. It's like this, Mayank bhai. You buy a coffee, right? You go to Starbucks, you buy a coffee. What do? You'll drink. And what do these traffickers do? We thought very lovingly and very passionately we go and put it in the trash can. But these guys, they just crush it and then they just throw it. So they use victims and then they throw them. It's like this, they'll use them for 2 years, not pay them. Like most of the people, they come through the border. They come through Mexico eating grass, leaves, and drinking their own urine. And out of 10, only 8 made it. Out of 10, only 1 or 2 has made it to the US. And these people don't have bank accounts. So the trafficker will always tell, when you go back to Mexico, when you go back to India, when you go back to Nepal or Pakistan, I'll give you back the money because you don't have bank account. So, but once you're below him for 6 months or 8 months, you're done.
Right. So tell me, this person that we are talking about, I'm not sure if you are in a position to name him, which I understand. But is he of the local origin? Which part of the world is he from?
The saddest part is that, friends and Mayank bhai, is that these people are educated. High profile people. They have got a very good repo in the community. Multimillionaires. They are US citizens. And the sad part is that these people have learned the trade of the trick, how to make money. So this is a big business. He has not only done to me, he has done to a lot of people in the past, but nobody had the courage to stand and fight.
So let's I said, drill down a bit. You're already in trouble. You don't know what to do. Where do you go from there?
It was very horrific. Like it is a slow process. Like you try to trap the victim like in a spider cobweb or like in a quicksand and you cannot come out. So like he took a loan, things changed. Like the snow came in December. We never saw snow in our life.
Right.
And we get a note from the school teacher that both my sons cannot come to school if they do not wear snow jackets. So we had sweaters from India, sweaters, right? See-through.
Right.
And I don't know what the hell is a snow jacket.
Okay.
So you can understand like how ignorant we are, or the immigrants when they come for the first time. But anyway, this could be a red flag in the school at that time. So that's why I do a lot of presentations in the schools and colleges, especially with the school bus drivers or the front office and the teachers, so where they can identify and rescue. I could have been rescued much earlier, but that's okay. But I'm just trying to help people now. So there are a lot of challenges that we had faced.
What were your son's age at that point?
My older son was 7 years and my younger son was 4 years. And just to tell you, Mayank Bhai and friends, that within couple of weeks or days, we were working 14 hours to 16 hours a day. And whenever labor trafficking happens, the perpetrator will provide accommodation next door, and he'll take care of a lodging and boarding. So that's a way they operate, so that you cannot tell that you cannot come to work, because even if it is snowing, it is raining, or there is thunderstorm. So labor is available 24 hours.
Right.
Number two, he knows that guaranteed he is going to come and work. And here, every victim puts in about at least 70 hours to 80 hours minimum per week with no days off. And they get fixed salary. If a person is from Mexico in dishwashing, he'll get $1,400 fixed.
Mhm.
And that's the salary they get.
So on the H-1B is obviously an exacting visa regime. When they grant you that visa, they go through a whole lot of things. So obviously you were exposed to all of that when you were granted that visa. When you came to the US, the employer is required to do a lot of things in order to justify your existence here. Do you know how he managed to tell the Labor Department or the ICE guys how he's able to maintain your status?
I don't think so. As far as if you sponsor somebody, Mayank Bhai, from India or any other country, and they come on an H-1B visa, the immigration department, nobody cross-verifies, nobody checks. Like,
No, but-
okay, is he still working there?
No, in terms of, say, for instance, paying the taxes every month, if the Labor Department keeps track of that, your H-1 could become invalid if it doesn't live up to the conditions that have been imposed on that.
See, he was very smart. So he used to manage. He knew how to manage the business and accounts.
Mhm.
So he might be issuing checks,
Okay.
and then I don't know what all Jolie did, because he made my wife work. My wife was not supposed to work, Mayank Bhai. He
Right.
fixed her salary $2,000 per month, and he says, "You got kids, you got to buy a house." And that's why
Okay.
he didn't pay us. He said, "I'm saving the money for the down payment." See, we didn't know anything. So it is a very deep story. So
Okay.
he made my wife sign the checks. Can you imagine? And
Yeah.
I don't know how he did it. So all business checks was signed by my wife.
You know,
And later on, it became a threat for me that we did something wrong. We did a fraud.
right.
It's
No,
like,
tell-
you don't know what I've gone through.
No, I understand. My point is this. When you look back, do you feel awkward that you were so unsuspecting or so trusting or even gullible about what you were being subjected to? How do you explain the fact that you did not raise any red flags at that stage?
I didn't know the law. I didn't know the people. It's so different here. Like in India, if you want to cut your hair, you just look down, you see the hair, you can reach the salon. I'm just telling you about a culture here, so I could not even find out where the salon is.
Mhm.
So basically at that time, when I think back today, I think what stupid I was. What idiot
Right.
I was.
Right.
Like, I was so scared. I was so scared of the Americans. I don't know. Like, that's what they manipulate you. They trick you. They use 4 words. Number 1, I'll get you arrested. Number 2, I'll get you handcuffed. And when they say handcuffed, they do it by action. Like this, they literally do it. They say, do you want to get handcuffed? And number 3, they will say, you want to get jailed? And number 4, they'll get you deported. And no
Okay.
foreign national, no human being likes to hear, if you're an innocent person and if you're a poor guy, you don't like to hear these 4 words.
I understand.
He'll
Yeah.
say, see, I told that guy, see how his face fell. He's so scared. So they psychologically create that fear.
Okay. Before we move on to what actions you eventually took, describe to me that horrible life that you were made to live. I was reading some of the stories about you, and at one point you described that you and your family were treated like rats.
Yeah, like it at times, like when I think it, at times it triggers me, it bothers me. They're like, they're like, I don't know to put the name of their families. There were ladies also, and they'll tell me, you stink, forget smelling. How bad you feel. And you talk to somebody like that, and I don't know, but even if somebody is not is spelling, I don't know, but you don't say that. Or either you tell him, okay, here, use this or do this. That's one.
Mhm.
Number 2, when we came, first time, like we were so excited. We used to work late night, so almost till 2 o'clock, and we just went home. We are so excited to see our kids, like and I opened the door, and I opened it with so much excitement and so much fast that my younger son was sleeping, waiting for us inside the room on the floor with his head near the door.
Right.
And I hit it so hard on his head that even today I get that jhatka.
Mhm.
And my older son was sleeping about 6 feet away in the underwear. Both are in underwears and sleeping, waiting for us. And that was everyday scene. And my wife used to break down, and I could not, because I don't know, there were a lot of stuff that we went through.
I believe this went through, I mean, you underwent this experience for about 18 months.
Yes.
And then what happened?
The best part is, I always tell, in God's home, there is delay, no denial. So,
Well, that's one way to look at it, but we won't go there. My point is this: towards the end of the 18-month period, what triggered you to take the kind of action that changed your life?
it happened somewhere in April, I think, or May, where my wife could not take it anymore. And she was so horrified seeing that what I was doing, because I've done everything, cleaning the toilets, dishwashing, mopping, you name it. And I did it with passion. Like, I just did it. Customers will come and tell me also, wow, the bathroom is so neat and clean. So my wife could not take it. So one day in the morning, she confronted the perpetrator in the kitchen and told him that, why don't you pay me my back wages? Now, can you imagine? After more than a year, he looks into her eyes and tells, what? What are you saying? Back wages? What? You're not supposed to work here. Who told you to work? Well, I can call the immigration department right now, and he used those 4 words. I can get you arrested. I can get you handcuffed, jailed, and deported. And then my wife was numb, and I was putting the buffet. And then my wife said, okay, why don't you pay the $1,000 which my husband gave you, Harold gave you? He's like, he calls me. And then looks into my eyes straight away, and he tells, Harold, they are so cold-blooded. Harold, what? $1,000? What cash? You never give me any cash. What are you talking?
I see.
Like what? How you feel? See, when you lose money in business, you can say $10,000 or you can say $50,000. You don't get hurt, or you feel okay, I made a wrong decision. But but when something like that happens, I don't know how to explain. It's a trust. It's a faith, and you just and it hurt me. So I was devastated with 3 things: with my emotions, feelings, and sentiments. And I was quiet. Again, I didn't say a single word, but that's why I told you, in God's home, there is delay, no denial. My chef, he heard it. And he got us out of the situation.
I see.
Yeah, we call him Binda Paji.
Okay. So
he's a nice guy.
So from that point, where did you contact the authorities? What did you do?
Yeah, we were going from post to pillar, and then eventually we didn't know what to do. He was threatening us. And then we got in hold of the US Department of Labor at the federal building. So this Binda Paji took us there. And can you imagine, to enter the building, you need an ID.
Right.
We didn't have an ID. So, but that gentleman, he is a very nice guy. Mark Stewart Lamb, very, very good guy. And he was going on a vacation the next day, I don't know, for almost 2 months. So he said that, and he was about to close the office. So we had called him. He said, no, if you're coming, we went there. Then we told the security people. So they called him. They were on the 10th floor, and he verified. They said, yes, they're coming to meet you. So they allowed us to go in. But the meeting went for 2 hours.
Okay.
Took us to a conference room, Nancy and myself, and he had a big pad like this writing. He might have written like almost 15 pages. I don't know what he was doing. And that is how our case got filed. My case was the first case on an H-1B visa. But that time also, this US Department of Labor didn't know that it is a case of human labor trafficking.
Right.
They thought it was a case of back wages. See, there are 2 things.
True.
And that is how it started.
Yeah.
And then my wife's case went to the Wage and Hour Division at Columbus. And we won the case.
And I keep coming back to this question for a simple reason that I'm sure our listeners and viewers are curious as well. Can you at least tell us if the person that did all this was of Indian origin, or he was a mainstream American?
No, this person, to be honest, is of the Indian origin, but he came in the 60s, I think, and he was flourishing.
Okay.
And this he has been doing it. So he knows these people, Mayank Bhai and friends, whenever your own people, they know how our mind works, how our feelings work. They know what's happening. So they know the culture. So we become easy trap.
Right. Okay, that triggers a little bit of a jump in my mind. I was looking again at your background, and you had a book called Frog in a Well, Turning Obstacles into Opportunities. There it is, yeah. Now, obviously, the trigger for the book was what you went through. Is that right?
No, in this books, I've just written like, it's just about quotes, but there's another book coming up, I think in next 2 months. There's a very smart lady in India, I think from Baroda. She's writing a book and she has interviewed like 100 people across the globe.
Okay.
So that is coming up, and I think that is very inspiring. That's one. And number two is that there's a Bollywood film that's happening.
Okay.
So it's almost on the verge where I have to just sign on the dotted line.
Okay.
So, in fact, Hriday and Hriday Rawal, who is my regional director in India, so he's coordinating with all the film producers there. So there are a lot of people like who are very aggressive and they're very passionate to do a film. And I was like, they said, and there are all this hype. They wanted to launch Irfan Khan, but this is going for a couple of months. And you know about Irfan Khan, sad thing.
Right.
And then they were talking about Sushant.
Okay.
That was a sad thing, like, you know. So I've come to know a lot about Bollywood stars now, which I never knew much.
Okay.
But Hriday is doing all my regional director in India is working on that. And I think most probably, I think we might do it by next month. So I think that film, people will get a total idea, like you might go through any situation in life. I always say that suicide or silence is not an option, choice or solution. So when people see that you're going through poverty or divorce or any problem in life, you can always come out.
Now, I'm sure a lot of those who have tuned in would be interested to know how you worked around the problem of H-1B and regularize yourself despite these many challenges.
Can you believe, Mayank Bhai and friends, that at one time I didn't have anything? Because the H-1B visa, my perpetrator cancelled it. I didn't know. I didn't know anything. And I didn't have the SSN. The SSN was there, but I had no clue. So I was as good as illegal. People used to people call you illegal. They'll not call you undocumented. So I was totally 100% illegal. I didn't have anything. But you don't know how I fought every day. I didn't sleep. He filed a case in the court. I went to the court. I countersued him for $3 million. I did. I said, come what may. If I have to die, I will die here. You have to shoot me. But I always believe that if you're honest, no one in the world can put you behind bars. And I knew that I was honest. Right. And I just fought it. I had no clue that I'll live. And today I'm talking is a blessing because he threatened me that he's going to kill me. And he meant it.
And which year would that be? Tell me the year that we are talking about.
Can you, repeat that?
No, tell me the year that you're referring to. All this was going on, the court case, etc. Which year was that?
Year, I think it started it started from 2004 end.
Okay.
Because the moment I quit, like he sold the restaurant to somebody else, and we were
Okay.
You know.
So from there, a life that difficult.
In fact, my life went from bad to worst, or terrible, or horrific, or traumatizing after 2004 end till 2007. It was I was finished. That was the worst period. That's why many times victims do not come out.
Right.
They accept it, they tolerate it, which is totally wrong. Because once you go out, how are you going to live? Because this is a different country. It's not India. And plus you cannot, if you don't have any transportation, you don't know the people. And they say that Americans are they don't like brown skin people. I was manipulated and I really believed it.
So what happened in 2007? How did the things suddenly turn around?
Yeah, in the minute, I told you he hired a guy to shoot me. And once I was talking to my wife, I'm not going to live. And I could see that I'm not going to live. And then I always tell, do not be scared what the child speaks, but be scared what the child sees and hears. So my younger son was playing on the floor, facing the wall on the carpet down, and we are just having a conversation. And my younger son, he comes, Rohan, and taps me from here. And I look, and he says, Dadu, if you die, what happens to me? Who will take care of my schooling? And he said it so politely, like a 4 or 5 year old child. Like I was speechless. It was like God talking to me and telling me, Harold, man, you got to live. So there are many things that transpire, and that is what gave me courage and hope that, oh man, if I die, he dies. If I die, my wife is gone and my other son is gone. So then I decided I got to fight. And I was going from post to pillar. And then in 2007, we met with an American lady. I was doing a program there. And then she was like so traumatized seeing my case. I was not talking. She used to hold my hand, shake me. Harold, what are you doing? Like, I can't believe this happened to you. And she just knew 10%. And then she got me connected with some lady. And that lady was in Texas. She had come here and she knew about labor trafficking. So within like 5 minutes, she said, this is a case of human labor trafficking. Till then, we also didn't know.
Okay.
And then we got connected with the FBI. So like FBI also was a big thing because they scrutinize, they do everything. So the FBI agent has found out in detail where I was born, what I have done, because they do not take cases like that. So they got to my past history. They investigated a lot of people here. And then they were totally 100% convinced this is a case of human labor trafficking. And then that thing flipped. That lady was very strong. She had 26 years of experience, I think, or more. And she always came to me as a mother. See, I really like this because I was so scared of her. I was so scared. People told me, you're done, you're deported. Because FBI, But once she came to, I'll tell you how she changed from a law enforcement agency, and she knew it. So she always come to our house and do everything like fingerprinting. She never allowed us to spend the money. She did everything free. She got us Indian food, Mayank bhai. Can you imagine? And then one day she had come for something, and then she went out of my house, and again she came and knocked. I opened. Well, and she could see my face. She said, Harold, I have not come here to deport you. That's not my job. You must be working under table, and I was working at a store.
I see.
Well, I am not here. You do whatever you want to do. I know you have to take care of your family. I thought if she comes to know, she'll get me deported.
Okay. Let me jump. Yeah.
But she also, I like that. I always tell the law enforcement agency people, like, if you know something is genuine, tell them that I'm not coming to arrest you or deport you. I'm coming to help you to get your status. So then that person feels so relaxed. And when she told me that, I felt so good. Well, Harold, you do whatever you want.
I see.
Whatever you want means you're not going to do anything wrong, like do drugs and all. But if you have to take care of your family and work, do anything you do. But my job is only to get you a status, and which she did. She got me a continued presence. I didn't know what is continued presence.
Yeah.
Then she got me a U visa. Then we had a rest is all history. On February 14, 2014, Bradley and Rohan got their permanent residency card.
I see.
God has a plan on a Valentine's Day. On June 27th, Nancy's birthday, we moved in this house, 2011.
I see.
Same day. So there are a lot of things that, I still remember on September 25th, 2011, we slept on the bed for the first time. And that was the Crossroad 10 American families who came and gifted us the bed.
Oh, nice.
These families have supported me a lot.
Right.
They are from the Crossroads, and they helped us a lot for many years. So they show us scholars. And then when we bought the house, I had called them, I think, on September 24th for a small gathering at my house. So we were so happy, because they helped us a lot, moral support and helping with my paperwork and all. And this we met just in the church, and they're all Americans.
Right.
And then they came to our house and they saw the house and all. I bought a condo. So they saw our bedroom. So we had a mattress where we used to sleep on the floor. So that that wife, she's a police officer's head. He's the head of Cincinnati. Very nice family. Dale and Karen. So she even asked and said that, oh, in your culture, you'll sleep down in India. That's your culture or what? So Nancy would have told, no, because you need money to get a bed, right?
Right.
But can you imagine this family? They said after they went from my house, they didn't sleep the full night.
I see.
Yeah, they coordinated, and next day morning they bought a bed, queen size bed for.
I see.
Nancy and me, and they got a bunk bed.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah.
And they came in the evening, 4 o'clock. Here only on this table, it was a different table. Here only, Nancy and we are having a cup of tea in the evening, 4 o'clock. Somebody knocks, and here they are, and they fixed it.
I see.
They came, fixed, they bought the quilt, everything.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. From there, let me jump a bit to your exposure to the Obama administration. How did that come about?
Yeah, that's $1 million question. Like one day I was asked in the press that, how did you get to the White House? Then I said, oh shoot, I don't know.
So tell us a bit.
I got to the White House. I'm very honest. I never applied. I didn't know what was going on. I had no clue. And I think I should do a lot of presentations. So I think I still have, I'm guessing. I'm still not 100% sure. I think I was doing a presentation in Washington, DC.
Okay.
And I think somebody might be there from the White House, and somebody might have seen me, or somebody recommended my name. And Obama was to start a United States Advisory Council on Human Trafficking by appointing survivors for the first time.
Okay.
So when the interview went on for almost 8 months, it was going on from, I think, like April of 2015 or maybe March. So they contacted me, they did all my interview, everything. Like, they asked me, like, they went through my social media page. They asked me, like, do you have any fight at your office? It means they went in detail.
Right.
But I didn't know what was going on, Mayank, by that time. I just didn't know about this advisory council also. And they're telling me, we are doing something, we're appointing. And I said, okay. And comes November, and they said, you should not tell anyone. It's very confidential. Like, they told me, to talk to my own family.
Okay.
And these people, they call me from the White House. And then in November, I have to get calls practically every day. Oh, next week, Obama is going to announce. Next week is going to announce. But you will not say anything. We are just trying to tell you. And I think they might have shortlisted me. And there are a lot of people, so they might have interviewed, I don't know how many, but they shortlisted only 11. And then comes December. And I'm like, in the end, I also got I got anxiety. Like I said, what's going on? Like they say, you're calling and I didn't know about the advisory council, nothing, to be honest. And I was getting so excited that, can you imagine again, on December 16th in the evening, when I was working for Cincinnati Children's Hospital, I get a call at 6:30 from the White House. Okay. And I pick it up and say, Harold, they tell me, I said, yes. Oh, we are calling from the White House, because it always comes, the number doesn't come. But the congratulations, Obama has announced you this thing in the thing. Now it's a good news. Now you can share it with your friends and all. And he just spoke to me for 1 minute, I think. And I said, okay, thank you. And I kept the phone. I did my work. I get done at night, 11:30. I come home, have my dinner, and then I was about to go to sleep. I just check my phone, and there are like hundreds of WhatsApp messages. I'm not. And my photograph has come in Times of India, Gujarat Samachar, NDA, all the front page papers in not only India, across the world. And I'm saying, what is going on? So, and can you imagine December 17th? It was December 17th in India. Right. And Obama might have announced it in the morning, I don't know, or in the afternoon, I don't know. So it became a big news, and December 17th was my birthday.
Oh, I see.
And then January 5th, 2016, I was in the White House.
Oh, I see.
Then the rest is all history.
No, so tell me a bit about that history. Let's not just sweep it off as history. Describe to me, here is an example of someone who went through an 18-month ordeal, being exploited by a cruel trafficker, finds himself in the White House. Tell me that leap, how that felt like.
I was very emotional. I still remember, because they treated us like diplomats. I didn't know that. Like, when you're at the White House, they'll always call us honorable. They'll say Honorable Harold D'Souza, or who are we are another person like Honorable Bukola,
Right. So
that's how. And I was so touched, because they'll never even touch or talk about your story. And the first time I think I would have landed on January 4th, I was going to DC. And my flight landed, the tires were just touched the runway, and I got a call on my phone, like nobody used to call me. But hello sir, this and that. I'm at the conveyor belt down, waiting for you. So they had sent a car and a driver to pick me up. And I said, oh, okay, fine, thank you. And so I go, I just had one, I had gone only for 2 or 3 days. So I go, and he's standing with a flag, like Honorable Harold D'Souza. And I was like, wow, and he's a great guy, American, full white American guy wearing a suit. And then I come, I said, yeah, I'm Harold D'Souza. So he takes the bag from my hand. Yeah, sir, let's go. And then I follow him and we just, how was your day? How was your flight? I said, no, it was good. And so you're just telling me. And then he's come in a compact limousine. I have never sat in a limousine. And then he gives me water, he gives me that wet towel and all. So it was a good experience. When I went to the White House, one thing I learned, Mayank Bhai and friends, is that people are so humble.
Mhm.
Irrespective of their positions. I met everyone, like the right hand of Obama, Ian, of President Donald Trump, Ivanka Trump. I've been to the Oval Office. I was called for Diwali Diya by President Trump, which was a big honor last year. So I was in the Oval Office with him. So it's a great honor, like, you know, and I always, whenever I go to the White House, Mayank Bhai, I always carry this with me. That's my dad.
Oh, I see. That's nice.
Yeah, it's always in my jacket. And I always say a prayer when I go to the White House that I'm representing all the victims and survivors globally.
What's your father's name, please?
Henry D'Souza.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is due to his blessing that I'm here, you know, and I miss him a lot. I always tell that physically he's not there, but spiritually he still lives here with me. I lost him in 2000, but he was my good friend.
Mhm.
And it is my father who always taught me that, Harold, people should respect you, not your chair. And this he told me at a very young age when I was doing good in India. And
Right.
that is something I always tell. So even if people tell me you're at the White House, so I said, that's fine. Like, we are still friends. So I come to India with whom I used to play Lokoti. I still go and meet them. I go to their house. Even if I drink the water and food from their own house. I don't say that.
Just for the information of those who may not know what Lakoti is, Lakoti is marbles of Kanche.
Bomeda, Uttaran,
Bhamera would be top. So he's talking about all the childhood games which no longer exist, unfortunately. Yeah. Okay. So from Obama to Trump, I mean, we all know that President Trump does not have a particularly favorable view of immigration and immigrants. In fact, it's described as one of the nastiest administrations when it comes to showing any degree of empathy towards immigration. How do you, as someone who's inside working within the system, how do you manage to change that view gradually? Because it doesn't seem to have any change at all. In fact, it seems to have gotten worse. You know that H-1B is under attack and it has impacted a hell of a lot of young Indians. So what's your view on all that?
See, Trump is a good friend of mine. I like him. I respect him. I met him personally. So what you see on TV is different, and when you meet him personally is different. That's one. But I'll be very honest. I'm not into politics.
Okay.
You know, so we are only into policy making. Like, see, this is the report we submitted to the president and to the PITF on July 28th. You know, that is PITF is President's Interagency Task Force. So this report was presented there. This is the fourth report which we presented, and in this everything is there. Like, and whatever we say, I've seen that they have implemented that, Mayank Bhai. Whatever you might be feeling, but I always tell people, like, do not come to the United States of America illegally. It's not worth it. You know it. I know it. People
Right.
get stuck. There are so many people who are not talking or not sharing their stories. But when I joined Obama's time, the gap was so thick in human labor trafficking and sex trafficking. During Trump's time, it has been reduced. It has come down. There's a lot of awareness being created. A lot of survivors are being engaged. But we are looking out to bridge the gap so that the law enforcement agencies and the victims and survivors, they are on the same line and we can eliminate this. It's not going to happen overnight.
Right.
Yeah, tell me.
Would you care to talk a bit about a broader picture in terms of how serious is human trafficking in the last, say, 5 years? Do you have figures that you can tell us a bit about?
I'll be very honest. I've been working here with the Attorney General's office in Ohio and at the governor's office. There is no methodology, honestly, especially in human labor trafficking. Maybe in sex trafficking, they have achieved some methodology and the more focus is on sex trafficking. But in labor trafficking, there is no, because I've started a Freedom Survey report. Why out of say 100%, 90% of the victims in labor trafficking are foreign nationals or immigrants. And out of that 90%, 80% are male.
Okay.
And again, from that, nobody comes out and shares. Nobody talks. So we don't have a fixed data. because people don't have the courage, don't have the faith in the justice system that they'll get justice. So when they talk to me, when they look at me, I tell them, come on, don't worry, I'm there. So that's why then people are coming out and talking. And that's the reason I started this organization called Eyes Open International,
Right.
which is focused to be the voice, courage, hope, and freedom for all the victims. So when they see me, we are helping so many people. We have helped so many people to get their status, they get their green card. There are so many like people from Nepal, they call me. The moment they got their status, they got the green card, they call me, oh, Harold Bhaiya. And they tell me, like, thank you very much. I said, मैंने कुछ नहीं किया. बोलते नहीं नहीं आप नहीं होता तो ये नहीं होता. Then I always tell them, see, I do two things. I said, number one, I'm a postman. And number two, I don't do it for money. So I know people and we just get them connected. So I'm not the thing. So if I can do something, get them connected, get them a status, so why not? Depending on case to case basis, genuine cases.
Right.
And then they tell me, I said, no, I don't do it for money. It's not a question of money. I just need your good wishes. Because I've gone through everything. My kids could not buy one candy. 25 cents. So I know what it is. Today in my house, everywhere there is candy. But so we have to, once you are out of the situation, we got to respect, recognize and reward these victims because they're good at heart. They're good human beings. Just because they have no documentation, does that say that they're like bad people? No. We should not judge them. We have no rights to judge them. We have to treat them as good human beings. And that's why now I'm trying to work on a law and with the governor's office where we can expunge the felonies in human labor trafficking. There are so many victims who have come through the border. Their employers have told them to destroy the passports. Now they're on the wrong side of the law, but they didn't know anything. But they're good people. They were trapped. They were smuggled in or whatever. But we are trying to work out that how we can give them a status. And they're here for the last 20 years. Can you imagine this one lady from India came in November 1998. She came on a 2,000 salary in New York as a domestic servitude. Then she came to Cincinnati. I met her a couple of years back, but it was 2,000 rupees per month, not dollars. And she used to tell me 2,000. So I always assumed it was
$2,000. Yeah.
But after 8 months, I came to know it was rupees, and I literally fell down. I said, my God, like, I assumed.
Yeah.
And now I took her to Columbus. We are working on her case.
Okay.
And she's not. And when I was driving her to Columbus on August 3rd, Monday, and we were there, and I told her, don't worry. She was there, and she said, God is not going to forgive me because she has told so many lies because people manipulated her. Lawyers told her do this, apply for refugee, apply for this, and her case was of labor trafficking. Then after that, we sat for 3 hours with the attorney, did everything. She doesn't have a passport. I said, tell the truth. I told her, don't worry, I am there. Nobody will touch you. Nobody will touch you. And you don't have to pay 1 penny. But tell the truth. What happened in your actual life.
Right.
And she told the attorney everything, the truth. I said, don't worry. She was still hesitant. I said, I'm there. I told the attorney also. Then the attorney spoke to her. But eventually, when we were driving back home from Columbus to Cincinnati, Mayingbai, every minute she was saying, now I feel so relaxed. I feel so relieved. I'm going to sleep well today. First time I'm going to sleep because she said the truth. I think that God will not forgive me. People told me to tell this. I told that. People told tell this. I told that. And I could literally feel she was so relaxed.
Right. You mentioned your organization, Eyes Open International, right? And I know for a fact that there is a major event coming up next month around the same time, maybe 17th or so. Tell us a bit about what it is that you propose to do as part of that upcoming event.
Yeah, I think we want to reach out to a lot of people in India and across the world. So on September 18th, we are having Eyes Open International is organizing a very big event. And the keynote speaker will be Ambassador John Richman. And then we have Dr. Kerry from Cambridge University, London, who will be on the panel. And then we have Honorable Dr. P.M. Nair from India. And I think everyone knows Dr. P.M. Nair, who was the head of the police for all India. And then we have Dr. Kalyani Gopal from Chicago, who is the president on the SAFE CHR human trafficking.
Right.
And we have Hriday Rawal, who will be on the panel. And then we have Fiona Dixon, who's the regional director at Canada. And we have recently appointed Viyashi Gandhi as a regional director for USA. Right. So we are aiming to educate people and telling them, because many people, in fact, during the pandemic, people are more excited to come to the US, which I'm totally shocked. And they say that ready to pay the agent. Don't pay the agents. I always encourage, come, but don't pay the agents. One lady paid last year, Mayank, by 53 lakhs
I see.
for a husband and a child. And after, I think, 5 months, she got deported. She got caught at the border and she's gone back. It was in the news. 53 lakhs means $74,000. If you have that type of money, you're
Why would you come? Right.
or come legally.
Right. Right. So now, I mean, you've experienced both sides of the problem. You've been a victim, you've been a survivor advocate. Where do you see your life going now from this point on?
I'm more focused on, I want to open about 50 branches by December 2021. That's when I quit my job from Cincinnati Children's Hospital last year on April 30th.
Mhm.
And I wanted to do this full time. And I got a good support from my wife, Dancy, where she's working for GE. My older son, Bradley, is working for Tesla. And my younger son is working for Apple. So I got a good family support. And I decided that whenever I start Eyes Open International, which my passion is that I wanted whatever funds I raise, because up till now I have not raised any funds through grant making because I don't know how to raise funds. But I got a lot of support. But I don't have the money, but that does not stop my work. You don't need money to do the work. So I meet a lot of victims. But what I'm trying to share is that money is not everything in life. You got to help the victims. And I spend a lot of time with the victims. So my goal with my nonprofit is that 90% of whatever we generate will go towards the victims, survivors, or for creating awareness.
Right.
So today, most of the people are all volunteers. And we got about 200 volunteers all across the world.
Okay. To wrap up our rather interesting conversation, would you care to tell those who aspire to come to America on, say, H-1B visas, for instance, what are the red flags they should be looking out for? Because you've seen it firsthand. What would be your, say, in terms of 3, 4, 5 tips that you might offer to anyone watching this and considering to come here on any of the work visas that are available?
Number one, I would request all my friends globally in India, US, or anywhere people are watching from Canada. I know there are people watching from Nepal, Pakistan. Is that number one is that follow us, Eyes Open International, on our Facebook page, because that is again a very educational tool. Number two, we have a website, Eyes Open International. There are numbers. So anybody coming, especially to the United States of America, I'm going to say a number. Please note it down. It's 1-888-373-7888. That is a national human trafficking hotline number. 24 hours, there are about 200 languages. Even if you're speaking Bengali, Hindi, Gujarati, Arabic, any language, just call them and everything will be taken care. You should have that handy. So if we find anything fishy, just call. Even if you're not a victim of human labor trafficking, but you're going to a restaurant, you're going to a motel, and you're going to a convenience store, you see something, just call this number so you don't get into trouble. But you're saving someone's life. So always I tell that when you save one victim, you save one survivor. But when you prosecute one perpetrator, you save 100 victims.
Mhm.
So always note this number and call. And nobody is going to question you. Nobody will know who called. And you will not be in trouble.
Okay. No, so this has been rather fruitful. I'm sure many of you who have tuned in would have gained quite a bit from Mr. D'Souza's personal ordeal and then personal triumph. Hopefully you had an interesting time during this conversation. I want to thank him for sparing an hour on a Saturday morning. It so happens that it's India's Independence Day and we addressed a lot of themes about independence, and my very best to you and your family, Mr. D'Souza.
Thank you very much, Mayank Bhai. I'm looking forward to see you in Cincy.
Sure. Look forward to likewise.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Jai Shri Krishna. Vande
Shri
Mataram, Mera Bharat Maan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Be happy.
I will. Thank you.